truly, Kathryn, when I was in the moment, I was really struggling and I was struggling alone. I felt like I couldn't even talk to my husband about it. Um, I think looking back, I probably had this or the beginning of all of this when my baby was just a few months old. So I went through those newborn stages, the early stages. I went back to work. And that's when I realized, what I was doing was not sustainable. It does take time and it takes reaching out for help and leaning on somebody, whether that's a trusted family member or a counselor or a therapist. We don't have to suffer alone. And, once you start talking about it and using that trusted source, things do get better.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Welcome back to the podcast, y'all. I hope that y'all have been enjoying this season. So the last time we visited, I was on air with Dr. Rankin, who we opened the door to postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. And what does that look like? What are the symptoms? How do you get help? How long does it last? All of those things. And today I felt like it was really important to talk to someone who had experienced PPD and PPA, someone that could speak from a place of experience and say, this is how I knew that what I was feeling was not normal. And this is what I did with that. And I think today's guest is really unique. While Britt is not a NICU mom, she is a mom who has an amazing platform. She's a news anchor in Austin on the NBC affiliate on KXAN. And after Britt experienced her complications postpartum, she went on the air and shared those publicly. And it blew up in the sense that so many people came forward and said, me too. And I was one of those people that said, me too. And I said, and also, can we visit on the podcast? And it was at the encouragement, I think, of seeing her vulnerability that this season was born. And so today we are going to dive into what does postpartum depression and what does postpartum anxiety look like for a real life mom? What did she experience and how did she move through it? If you find yourself perhaps in a situation that's even more critical, please know that there are places that you can reach out to. Namely, here in the United States, you can reach out to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You can either text or call 988. So if that is you, please know that that resource is there. My guest today is Britt Moreno. She is an Emmy award-winning news reporter and news anchor, as well as an Emmy-nominated host. She anchors the evening news for the NBC affiliate KXAN News in Austin. She is a wife and a mother of 2. And in her spare time, she loves being with her family. She works with organizations helping women and children, and she MCs charity events for various nonprofits in town. And so with that, let's chat. Well, Britt, I'm so excited that you're here. I have been following along on your journey for a while, and I'm just grateful that you're here to talk about a really important topic.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited about the number of people we can potentially reach with our discussion today.
I agree. Well, you, most people don't have an Emmy sitting behind them whenever I interview them, so hopefully I love that.
It's so funny. I never even come in this room. This is my husband's little makeshift office. So
I love it. No, it's like a little side flex, and I think it's important because you use your platform to do great things. So maybe let's start there. How did you get involved in broadcasting? What led you into that career?
It's funny. When I look back, I realize I always had, I think, the skills required for this job, but candidly, I was stage fright and I was an insecure kid and kind of an unsure young adult. So I don't think I ever voiced the dreams out loud that I wanted to be on TV until maybe college. But, this job is interesting in that it requires people really just like you and me, people who like asking questions of other people. And I've always liked doing that. I've always liked talking to people and interacting with people, reading, writing. So when I look back, I think, okay, God did have a plan because I had all these interests and skills, and it just helped me get to where I am today. And then, of course, there's the demonstrative aspect about TV news. And, I happen to love that too. It's really a rush.
Well, it's great because you get to talk about a lot of things, and sometimes they are what happens on the news that day, but sometimes they become a little bit more personal, like in your case. So I'm curious, before we dive into a little bit of postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, how did being a mom change as in your broadcasting career? Like, did you see a shift, Britt, as you moved into, okay, I was doing broadcasting and now I'm doing broadcasting, but now I'm also a mom? What
Right.
changed for you?
I think it changes all of us, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in a way, we're all changed by the experience of giving birth and having a child, and having someone where their happiness is most important. And I think one of the ways in which it changed me is, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So if there was some sort of professional hangup in reporting, or maybe I misspoke on air, or there was an editing faux pas, or something went wrong in production, that would have eaten me up alive. Truly, pre-kids, Brit in her 20s, I would not have been able to sleep. It would have just torn me to shreds. But after having kids, I think I learned what's really important. And the truth is, now I mess up all the time, but I just, pick myself up and move on and keep going. That's kind of a metaphor for life, right?
Yeah.
But, all that matters is that my kids are healthy and they're happy, and their happiness really supersedes anything that I could do at work. So I think it changed me for the better. I still love what I do, but there's just far more important things.
Yeah.
And those are my kids.
Well, motherhood can be an opportunity. We say at our house, it's an opportunity for growth,
Yes.
whether it's the hard days or the good days. So I definitely can relate to that. I'm sure people listening can too. So I know I mentioned in your bio that you have two children, and after the birth of your second baby, you were back at work, but I think you found yourself struggling a little bit, and then you
Mhm.
took the opportunity, Britt. Not all of us have the same platform that you do, but you took an opportunity to share what it was that you were struggling with on air. And so maybe walk us through what happened after your second baby and then why you chose to share that so publicly on the news.
Yeah, I'll just start with this. Whoever is listening, you might be going through postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, or you might just be having a few bad days. And I just want people to know I have a new clarity now that some time has passed. My baby is now one. And, I've done a lot of research now because I did start reporting on all this. And so that said, I look at things differently. But truly, Kathryn, when I was in the moment, I was really struggling, and I was struggling alone. I felt like I couldn't even talk to my husband about it. Um, I think looking back, I probably had this, or the beginning of all of this, when my baby was just a few months old. So I went through those newborn stages, the early stages. I went back to work. And that's when I realized, what I was doing was not sustainable. And so the way that this postpartum anxiety manifested for me, by the way, I didn't even know that was a term until recently, but yes, it is. Women can have this. But the way that manifested for me is I was truly afraid to be away from my kids. I was afraid to go to the grocery store. I don't even want to tell you the thoughts that would go through my head when I was in the store with my kids. There were so many times where I just packed them all up and we went home without any groceries. I just took them right home.
Mm.
I was afraid to be at the news station. I worked at night, and I was honestly terrified to come out to my car. When you have postpartum depression, you can often have a lot of self-critical thoughts. And because I was sort of going through all this stress and anxiety, I couldn't help but think, I am not a good mom to them. Somebody could be a better mom to them,
Mm.
or they'd be okay without me. Um, and so when you have thoughts like that, they can internalize and they can fester. And for me, I think that I'm a little stubborn. So I would have kept going to work because one of my core values is work is important. You go to work no matter what. But truly, this the stress was really taking a toll on my physical being, and my body was breaking down. And that's really hard when you have an HD, 3D camera in your face. But the physical toll was what really kind of stopped me in my tracks. I had a rash from scalp, face, all the way down to my ankles. I kept having these weird repeat eye infections that would, make my eyes so small. It looked like somebody had punched me. And then the worst one, because as a news anchor, you don't want terrible hair. I was losing so much hair. It was different than the normal, postpartum
Right.
hair loss. This was extreme hair loss to where I had literal bald patches on my head. I couldn't even show my husband or show my sisters, my mom, anything. And I just thought, okay, there's a certain point here where I can't keep covering up the rash and hiding the missing
Right.
hair, for work. And so that's when I realized, I need to take some time here. And it's not easy. It's not easy for anybody to admit what they're doing isn't working. There's a financial component to things. We're a two-income household. So I think that was weighing on me as well. But ultimately, it was the right decision. And, I want to stress to other people that it does take time, and it takes reaching out for help and leaning on somebody, whether that's a trusted family member or a counselor or a therapist. We don't have to suffer alone. And, once you start talking about it and using that trusted source, things do get better.
Brett, how long did it take you? So when you started experiencing some of those physical challenges, how long did it take you to say from when you started feeling anxiety to getting to the breaking point, about how much time transpired before you reached out for help?
Oh, that's a good question. And now I feel silly saying this, but I was too embarrassed to reach out for help because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what I was going through. I thought, oh, I'm just emotionally exhausted because I'm not sleeping because I have a baby up all night. You know, um, there was a point too where I didn't want to leave the kids to go to the doctor. So that was a tough component as well. To physically be away from them was hard. And I had to go into the doctor for them to help me.
Right.
So when I look back, I think I actually might have had some of this anxiety during pregnancy. There were some reoccurring thoughts that would truly keep me awake. I would come home from the newscast. We anchor the 10 p.m. newscast. I would come home and I would just be sitting downstairs in the living room, crying, sobbing by myself until the wee hours of the morning. So I think that this developed during pregnancy, and it can for some women. And I think it might have started after that. They call it the baby blues. So there's
Mhm.
that maybe um, 4-week period where women can have baby blues. But after that, it's not baby blues anymore. It's
Right.
something else. So I think that it probably happened during pregnancy, and it probably lasted 8 or 9 months. And even today, there's good days and bad days. My baby's a year old now, but there's every once in a while, there's a day where I know I'm not feeling myself. And now that I can recognize what's going on, I feel better equipped to deal with it. But it's a journey for sure, and I'm sure anybody who's gone through it can attest to that.
So as I'm listening to you speak about feeling ashamed and embarrassed, and you didn't even want to tell your husband. So how did you get from that, Britt, to going on air to the greater Austin area and saying, I was struggling and this is why you haven't seen me and this is what I'm doing? Like, how did you get from there to there?
It was not easy. I wish I could tell you that, you know, I wanted to reach people initially, and I was charged by this cause, and it wasn't like that. I mean, it was uh it was embarrassing, and I was trying so hard not to be ashamed. But when I left, I just so people understand, I took maternity leave. I came back to work. I had the breaking point, if you will, and then I left again. And during that time, I was off social media. I didn't watch the news. I really didn't go anywhere. I didn't see anybody. I was just at home with my kids. And I know that sounds a little bit strange, like I was some sort of recluse, but
No, it doesn't. Sounds healthy.
it's exactly what I needed in the moment. when it was time to come back and I felt ready and I felt like, okay, I got to show up for my managers now. It's time to go back to work. I did put a social media post out. And Kathryn, it was truly incredible. Men, women, families, grandparents, mothers, I mean, people came out of the woodwork and just responded so kindly. And they were supportive. And I just felt like there are so many other people out there who could be going through what I was going through. And I don't want them to feel as badly as I did. So when I came back to work, my boss encouraged me to let people know where I had been. And I did. And once I gave that little message live in our 6 p.m. newscast, I believe it was, even more messages happened. And even more people said, this happened to me. And I had depression and I had anxiety, but I didn't know what was going on. One woman saying, I didn't want to be here anymore, and I'm so grateful that I am, and that I was able to get through this, keep talking about it. And so once you hear stories like that, that this is the right thing to do. We have to normalize this conversation. And I'll say this as well. Never before in my life had I ever talked about my own mental health. That was a word that we often reported about, but I never associated myself with any type of mental health. Now, that's an archaic way of thinking. Now we know it's perfectly acceptable. And moreover, we need to talk about our mental health. This is important. Yeah. This is who we are as professionals, as moms, as parents, as sisters. This is what we have to talk about, and we have to put that to the forefront. So that's also why this is an incredibly important conversation to have.
Well, I have to come clean, because when you shared what you did on the news, my husband was the one who saw it and sent it to me. And he is a good man. But when I saw that, I looked at him and I said, I think we need to talk about this on the podcast. Like, this is, quite frankly, Britt, it was your, I think, vulnerability and saying like, hey, this happened to me and it was really hard. And I'm just sharing where I am, and it was really organic. And I think as I listened to you share about that, I was mentioning it to the founder at Hand to Hold, and she said, Kathryn, so many NICU moms are diagnosed with PPD or PPA because they missed their 6-week appointment because they're in the NICU with their baby. So they missed that critical appointment. Right. And I thought to myself, we have to give like a toolbox to NICU moms, and really any mom, because I had PPD and PPA after my NICU baby. These are all the things that you can talk about. These are all the things that you can consider that might help alleviate some of that. And so had you not shared that, this entire season would never have happened, because it was what I saw and like the vulnerability with you and sort of what can we do to help, that like this entire season of the podcast was born. So your vulnerability allowed us to dive into that, and I'm really grateful. I didn't tell you that earlier. I didn't want you to know until we recorded, but yeah, it was really important. So thank you.
It makes me want to cry. Thank you. Thank you for including me. Thank you for the empathy, and thank you for doing this. It is important. And I know what you do every single day is helping people. So thank you.
Well, I think that this is a topic that, and you hit on it, that women are ashamed. Like sometimes we feel like we can do all the things and we can do them well. Or if we have a little dip, it's okay, we'll bounce back. Sometimes we need a professional to help us through that. We need to open up to the people that love and support us, because sometimes there's no way out of it unless you go through it, but you got to have some people alongside you. And I'm grateful that you mentioned that it's okay to talk about it and it's okay to address it, and you're not a failure as a mom. You're not a failure as a human if it happens. You didn't do anything wrong. You just need some help. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you. So whenever you were looking for a way out or a way through, Britt, did you feel like you had any barriers to finding the things? I know you mentioned sometimes it's financial. Sometimes people are afraid or limited in getting help that way. But did you experience anything else that was a limiting factor in you getting help?
I'll say this, having a good, trusted OBGYN really is important. This last pregnancy, I didn't know my doctor very well. In fact, we, it was a miracle from God. I'd had trouble conceiving this second time. I got some tests. I realized, oh my goodness, I have an issue I didn't know about because it did not reveal itself when we had our son, in my first pregnancy. So, there was all that sort of in the back of my mind. And I didn't know my OBGYN very well, but she was the person who kind of told me this was happening. So I thought, okay, let me stay with her and, show some loyalty, even though I may not be the most comfortable. But, it turns out it might not have been the best decision because when I was going through this, I really didn't feel comfortable reaching out to even her. And I'll say this about OBGYNs, they are experts in their field, but oftentimes they're not completely trained to be mental health professionals.
Right.
So, in a way, I'm sure she thought she was doing what she needed to do, which was send me to another expert. But in the moment in my mind, I thought, oh, she doesn't want to deal with me. She's
Mm.
passing me on to someone else. So, again, it's no fault of hers. I think truly she was trying to help me. And that is her way of helping, saying, hey, you need to go to an expert in this field.
Right.
But when you're so unsure of what's happening, that really is the last thing you want, is to be in front of a different person in that moment. So I would say that's something that's revealed itself even in my research, is that, you know, when we get pregnant, we really should include a mental health plan in our
That's
planning.
good.
We
That's
have the
good.
nursery done. We've got all the cute baby clothes in the closet. We do all the things to prepare and get ready. My husband says that I nest and I go crazy cleaning and purging, but we also need to develop a plan. And that might mean just having some websites, bookmarked, of places where we can go to access 24-hour help. They do exist out there. In fact, I included that in some of my reporting over at KXAN because I think it's important for people to know that there is free help out there. And I think we also need to make sure all of us keep talking about this, because even the dads and the grandparents and the friends, they need to hear this conversation so that they can check in on the new mom and say, hey, are you yourself right now? Let me call your doctor and set up an appointment for you, just to make sure. There's things that we can all do as a community to look after one another.
Right. Did you have anybody doubt authenticity, Brett, of what you were going through, or be like, well, are you sure it's not, like maybe you need to like go on a walk, or maybe you need to, did you
Right.
have anybody do that?
Family members love to do that, right? Oh,
Yeah.
but you have a healthy baby. That's all that matters. Or, yeah,
Right.
go exercise, get some fresh air. People mean that out of the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah.
But it can cast a little doubt within your own mind. Fortunately, once I finally came clean to my mom and, my sisters, they were very supportive and said, okay, you need to go to your doctor. And they actually told me for another several months before I finally called my doctor. Um, but I think as a professional, I was concerned that my managers would sort of scoff at my ask to
Right.
leave work. In fact, when I was going through the rash and the eye problems, I actually sent pictures to my manager. She didn't ask for them at all, but I think I was worried she would think, oh, Britt's just calling in, and I think that was my own insecurity. Truly, they
Right.
were very supportive, but I think for me, again, that mental health conversation was just so far out of my comfort zone. Admitting that I wasn't okay wasn't something that I regularly did. So for me, I just thought, oh my goodness, they're going to doubt me. So I hope others don't feel that way, but I suspect that it's a very common thing.
Well, because when you feel like you have it together most of the time and then you admit to people that you don't, you're afraid that maybe they may not believe you, or
Right.
maybe your workplace is not as supportive, or maybe you've seen the way that other people, when they've come forward with challenges, how they've been treated, and you wonder, will I be treated the same way? And so
Right.
there's a lot of factors at play, but ultimately you need to be healthy so that you can be healthy for your family. And I'm grateful that maybe you gave people the push to say, like, it's okay to admit that you're not okay. So
Right.
biggest takeaway, Britt, that of all the things that you've been through, I know you just said that your baby just turned 1. What's the biggest takeaway from all of this that you're really reflecting on?
I think it's that new moms and dads need to know that this is very common. It's much more common than we even realize. Experts say that, you know, postpartum depression is the number one most common side effect of pregnancy. It happens. 1 in 7 moms will go through some sort of perinatal mood disorder, and that number, by the way, does jump for those women who have high risk pregnancies, who have babies in the NICU, military families, I've heard, minority families. So I just want people to know that you don't have to go through this alone. Nobody has to suffer. And I had one of the counselors I interviewed for one of my stories told me, if you have scary thoughts, say those scary thoughts out loud to a friend or a husband or a trusted, person, because once you say them out loud, they have far less power. And I thought, oh, that's a good thought because good moms can have bad thoughts. It's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. Well, speaking of NICUs, you did a story. I'd love for you to summarize a little bit. It's personal because it was the NICU that we were in. So at Dell Children's NICU here in Austin, they actually have a really unique program. So I'd love for you to share with people what that unique program is and how it benefits NICU moms.
Firstly, God bless all the NICU families because that is a struggle. I do not know. I can only imagine, and that has to be so challenging. Dell Children's, though, has a very special entity. It's a behavioral health center in the NICU for moms and babies. So they literally offer this trifecta of help from medical experts. And they're one of the only organizations in the country that offers a perinatal counselor, a perinatal psychologist, and a perinatal psychiatrist. And it's embedded healthcare there in the NICU for moms. Supposing these moms are high risk and know their baby is going to end up in the NICU, the help starts there for them. For the moms who have babies in the NICU and afterwards, that helps is there for them. I interviewed this woman for this particular story that we put on the air. She was a mom, and her story sounds a lot like yours, actually. She knew at 20 weeks that her baby wasn't growing well and that there could be some serious problems. And once she had the baby, her little boy was in the NICU, in the little incubator, in that bassinet. And she says he has all these tubes coming out of him and the oxygen. And she said, I couldn't help but think, I did that to him. I caused it. Now, of course, we know there's no way she caused it. She did everything right. But as a mom, you can't help but carry that guilt. And so those were some of the thoughts that were running through her head. So while her baby is really struggling to survive, she also is going through PPD and PPA. And the health team there, she says, was literally the guiding light for her and brought her out of the darkness. So that was a wonderful story. Thank you for asking about it. That resource is here in Austin, Texas. It's just amazing.
Well, I'm hoping that if there's NICU professionals listening, that they call them up and say, how can we implement that in our hospital? I know that you're right. The guilt is pretty heavy, and the shame is too. And so to know that there are people that they like their sole job is to look after the caregivers, particularly moms, and say, how can we sort of intercede and stop the hard things from happening and instead get you the help that you need. I loved that story. That one resonated with me pretty deeply. So thank you for that. So I always ask, it's my last question because I love hearing people's wisdom. So if there is a mom listening who feels like she may be a candidate, she may be someone who's suffering from postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, what would your encouragement be to her?
There's no time limit on when this can happen for a mom or a new parent. And I want to make sure that people know that. I've had experts in this field tell me that a mom can experience PPA or PPD a year after birth, up to 4 years after birth,
Wow.
because the level of care is so intense when you have little ones in the household. So sometimes a parent can go through that when the baby is a toddler, for example. So I just want people to know that there is help. Please voice your concerns or your questions. Call your doctor, a friend, a counselor, a therapist, because you don't have to go through this alone. There is help, and there's really a sense of strength in sharing our stories because it is so common. It's just not talked about, but here we are trying to make that change. And so I hope folks know that you don't have to suffer alone.
Britt, your vulnerability is a real gift to, I hope, every mom listening. So thank you so much. I don't know about y'all, but I was deeply touched by Britt's vulnerability in our conversation. It's today's 2-minute take. So what were the two things that I took away? I took away a lot more than that, but I think that there are a couple that really stood out to me. The first is what that expert shared with Britt, that when you are feeling something and it feels overwhelming and hard, say it out loud to someone that loves you. That could be your husband. That could be your best friend. It could be a family member that you trust, but someone that loves you. When you can voice whatever hard thing it is that you're feeling or thought that's come into your mind and you feel like, I don't know if I should say this out loud, say it out loud to them because they love you. And perhaps they can be the person that stands in for you, that makes the phone call for you, that takes the thing off your plate, which allows you to seek help. But there is power in sharing our words out loud and allowing those words to no longer have power over us. So that was one really big thing that stood out to me. And the second is that PPD and PPA, so postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, can happen to any of us, whether you are a NICU mom or not. Sometimes it's trauma on top of trauma. You have been in the NICU and then now you also have this. Or maybe you are having a baby after your NICU baby, like me, and you find yourself in a situation where you have PPD and it's not even your NICU baby, it's your quote unquote normal baby that you find yourself in that situation with. So I think Britt reminded me that those two things, PPD and PPA, can happen to any mom. And so it's just a matter of saying, this is happening and I need some help, and not being ashamed to reach out for that help. And I'm just really grateful for that conversation that she shared. If you loved this episode, I hope that you take a chance to review us and rate us on Spotify or Apple or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, as well as subscribe to the channel. We're also over on YouTube. But I want you to know that this season is full of a lot of great conversations. Britt was one of my favorites already, but I have been interviewing some amazing people who I believe are going to be real assets to you as you are finding yourself in the NICU and you're like, now what? So don't go anywhere, because the next time we'll be chatting about this.
The wave came over me of awareness and rage and sadness and like everything that can happen in a postpartum body when you realize that you don't have enough time to spend with your child when they leave the hospital. And so I decided to write an email to leadership at the organization. And thankfully, that email went up the chain. I didn't hear anything for about a couple weeks. And so it was like, Urgh. But then I finally heard back on an all-staff call that they had decided to expand their paid parental leave policy and include between 4 to 6 weeks of NICU-specific leave paid on top of their regular paid parental leave policy.
Because of an email.
Because of my email. Yeah.